Napoleon, first emperor of the French Empire, was arguably the greatest conqueror in history. But what was it that made him so good at what he did? How was he able to defeat his enemies in almost all the battles he took? Well, first, let's talk about how Napoleon was in the position to conquer his enemies. Napoleon was born in Corsica, a French-owned Mediterranean island. His parents allowed him to travel to the French mainland in order to attend military schooling. He was made lieutenant in an artillery unit, but he wanted to raise the ranks, but could not because powerful positions were handed out based on nobility and not talent. Luckily for Napoleon, the French Revolution was right around the corner and started in 1789. He loved the idea of equality, and if it meant he could rise the ranks, he supported the revolution. Napoleon fought against the counter-revolution in Toulon and got promoted, as well as fighting a royalist uprising in Paris and getting promoted yet again to the title of Major General, which is just when the people started realizing his military might. Now we get to see Napoleon first become so infamous. Tensions began in Europe because of the revolution that had just taken place in Europe, which threatened the power of balance in the continent. France found itself in war basically against all of Europe, called the First Coalition, which went on from 1792 to 1797. France had a plan in this war, and it was to take control of Vienna and knock Austria out of the war using the armies led by General Jourdan and General Moreau. General Napoleon was down south near Italy and was meant to be a distraction. While Jourdan and Moreau had great struggle versus Austria forces, Napoleon, although outnumbered, was able to split the Sardinia and Austrian armies into two, defeating them each at a time with the Austrian forces fleeing back to Austria. Because of this, we get to see the first reason Napoleon was so good at war, and it was because his men respected him as a leader. Historian J. Ricard of historyofwar.org states, Napoleon whipped his army up into a patriotic frenzy and sent them out across the bridge. The advancing French infantry got about halfway across the bridge before they came under such heavy Austrian fire that they were forced back. This shows that Napoleon's army respected him so much they were willing to go and basically commit suicide for him by running across a bridge which held their enemies on the other side. After establishing Napoleon as the first consulate, or leader of France, the War of the Second Coalition began, and Napoleon began to show his second reason of being so good at conquering his enemies. This was the element of surprise and deception. In 1800, Napoleon's army moved to Geneva in a supporting position behind General Moreau's army to go and take on the Austrians. But instead, Napoleon took to the south through the Alps as a surprise attack on the Austrians seizing Genoa. When the Austrians saw him, they expected him to break their siege, but instead he went for their supply line in Milan and forced the Austrians to come fight him, in which he won in the Battle of Maranago. Finally, a third coalition against France was formed, and Napoleon split up his armies into corps, which basically acted as their own smaller armies independently. These little armies were able to live off the land instead of relying on supply trains, which greatly improved their speed and movement, to which Napoleon used to their advantage. Napoleon was able to traverse long distances, outmaneuver his enemies, and then destroy their armies. This was the third reason why he was so good at conquering, his speed. According to PBS.org, in less than 6 weeks, the French reached Danube, catching the Austrian army by surprise. While his enemy wavered, Napoleon struck the decisive blow. This happened at the Battle of Ulm. Austria had lost nearly 50,000 men, and all of which were captured, showing that speed really played a key role in how Napoleon attacked and how he conquered. Once again, Napoleon also used innovative artillery tactics against his opponents for maximum output damage onto his enemies. Napoleon was usually able to pin down his enemies and concentrate his artillery gunfire towards them, causing many casualties towards his opponents. A good example of this was in 1807 during the Battle of Friedland versus the Russians, in which Napoleon noticed that the Russians had positioned their backs towards the river, so he pushed them back against the river, then unleashed havoc with his artillery strikes. In a quote by David Chandler in The Campaigns of Napoleon, "At last the sweating gunners brought their smoking pieces within 60 paces of Bennigsen infantry. At such point-blank range, the French case shot wrought terrible havoc upon their opponents, while companies being reduced to gory shambles in a matter of seconds." What this quote proves is that the battle actually happened and the pin-down maneuver was Napoleon's. Thank you for watching this.